Good morning, everybody. I'm your 2015 PTOS Vice President. It's very nice to see so many people in the room. Always good. So it's now my pleasure to introduce the Commissioner for Patents, Mr. Drew Hirschfeld. Mr. Hirschfeld was appointed Commissioner in July 2015. He leads and manages more than 10,000 employees as the Patent Organization's Chief Operating Officer and manages and directs all aspects of patent operations, examination policy, patent quality management, international patent cooperation, resources and planning, and budget administration. In his previous role as Deputy Commissioner for Patent Examination Policy, Mr. Hirschfeld served as an authority on patent laws, rules, and examining practice and procedure, and provided oversight and direction for the Office of Petitions, Patent Legal Administration, and the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure. Mr. Hirschfeld previously served as Chief of Staff to the Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and Director of the USPTO. Mr. Hirschfeld began his career at the USPTO in 1994 as a patent examiner, became a supervisory patent examiner in 2001, and was promoted to the Senior Executive Service in 2008 as a Group Director in Technology Center 2100. Mr. Hirschfeld holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Vermont and a JD from Western New England College School of Law. Please help me give a warm welcome to the Commissioner of Patents, Mr. Drew Hirschfeld.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Brandon, for the introduction. When I was asked to come here and introduce Chris Fawcett, who's our keynote speaker, I have to admit I jumped at the chance. Okay, so for those of you that know me, know that when I became commissioner, one of my initiatives was to make sure that we all at the PTO had a better understanding of the impacts of our daily decisions, right? So we're all here at the PTO. Our job is to issue valid and clear patents. We want to make sure that we know what's happening on the outside to those. So I took upon myself to start to show videos to people and to talk more about inventors and inventors' accomplishments that they have. And the primary reason for doing that was simply to let us see there's real-world implications to every decision that we have and to really show the importance of all of those decisions. So a few months ago, at one of my first staff meetings with my managers at just after becoming commissioner, I have about over 700 managers, I showed a video of Garrett Brown. Now, Garrett Brown was supposed to be here today and speak with Chris Fawcett, but Garrett couldn't make it due to an injury. He's doing well, but he couldn't make it today. But the point I'm trying to say is I showed the video, so I have a tie to what's occurring here today because that was the first video that I chose. This was a National Inventors Hall of Fame induction video of Mr. Brown, and I thought it was fantastic when Brandon came to me and said, we're going to have him speaking here. He came up to me right after seeing the video. Just seemed to be a great nexus. So I've shown some videos after the Garrett Brown video, and this was his invention of the Steadicam. I asked all the managers, give me some feedback. Let me know, do you like to see these videos? Do you feel they were effective in letting you see the big picture and the importance of making the decisions that we do? And the feedback I got was an overwhelming yes. So I've continued to show other videos to try to get the message out, and of other National Inventor Hall of Fame inductees and other people as well. And today we get to hear from somebody, which in my opinion is much better than a video. Videos are great, but we get to hear from Chris Fawcett. And as I have learned about Chris and his work, you realize that the story just gets better and better and better. And he's a co-inventor with Garrett Brown on the invention you're going to see today, and he's going to discuss today, the elevating walking chair. But additionally, just a phenomenal person, many inventions. It just, as I said, the story gets better and better as you start to dive into it and read. So I started with the Steadicam video with Garrett Brown, and the story continued. So let me give you a little bit of background. I mentioned Garrett Brown, who couldn't be here today. He was the inventor of the Steadicam, a National Inductee Hall of Fame. I think he has been here before, so hopefully some of you have seen him. Chris Fossett, who is our keynote speaker, Again, he was a co-inventor with Garrett on the elevating walking chair, has many other inventions as well. So he has invented the Steadicam, which is a mobile camera platform for a Segway, and also the Exovest, which is a support harness for the Steadicam that's currently being used by Boeing and the U.S. Navy. And again, today what you'll hear about is his invention with Garrett Brown on the elevating walking chair, which assists those with difficulties walking. So again, I mentioned the story gets better. So he has a degree in architecture, and I realized what a rounded person he is when I was reading his bio. And he used to design oil rigs. He's worked as a musician, an opera singer, a circus acrobat, and a BBC News reporter. I need no explanation for that. It speaks for itself. So with that, Chris Fawcett, welcome to PTOS, and thank you for being here, and thank you for helping me spread the message about all the great work that the inventors do that we work so hard to support.
Well, I don't know how I'm going to live up to an introduction like that, but I'll do my best. I've come to tell you a little bit about what happens before the papers arrive on your desks, the trials, the tribulations, the sleepless nights, the endless cups of coffee, when we're trying to figure out what is it that we're actually doing. And the story of this invention is as much a story of a friendship between myself and Garrett Brown, who you see sitting in the picture. Garrett's in a neck brace. He couldn't make the journey, unfortunately, but he sends his regards to all of you. Garrett taught me the most important thing about inventing, and that is wanting it. That is, do you really want it, the thing that you're about to invent? Is it something you think somebody might want, possibly? Or is it something that you cannot imagine a world where this does not exist in the future? And he told me that that is the key to inventing. You've got to really, really want the thing that you're working on. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. This story starts a long way back with Rodney. Rodney is Garrett's father. And Rodney had patent number 2,600,000 and something for hot melt. Every paperback book in the world is stuck together with hot melt glue. And that made DuPont Chemicals $1 billion. And it made Rodney a gold watch, which he's inordinately proud of course. Now, it was a great disappointment to Rodney when Garrett went off to become a folk singer and then became a filmmaker. But ultimately, it worked out for the better. Garrett loved the moving camera. He loved the moving image. A static image does not portray how we see the world. We walk through the world. We perceive it as we pass through it. And he wanted to always have a moving shot. If you pick up a camera and stick it on your shoulder and walk around, it shakes. And if you pull a business card out of your pocket and shake it in front of you, you can't read it. But if you shake your head, you can read it perfectly, because we have a stabilization system built into our brains, into our optical systems. So a camera on the shoulder does not replicate that. He wanted a device that did replicate that. So he was stuck with his little tiny Bolex on a dolly that was designed for a camera that was about 20 to 50 times heavier, but it was what he had. It was what he worked with. But he wanted something better. So he locked himself in a motel room for a week and came up with this rather scrappy little drawing. During the meantime, he was running up and down the corridors with broomsticks with cameras stuck on them, scaring the hotel staff to bits. But he came up with the Steadicam, this device that just worked perfectly. It replicated how we see the world. And it changed the way movies are made. So 1.5 million patents later, Rodney is proud of his son. And this great invention that you see here comprised of 3 articles. You have what we call the sled, which is the mount the camera goes on. And then it's isolated from the arm by a 3-axis gimbal. The arm carries the weight. And then the vest transfers the weight into the body. And that's basically what a Steadicam is. Garrett went on to shoot well over 100 movies. The first movies he shot were Rocky, and The Shining. And if you look at the list of over 100 movies he's done, you've probably seen half of them. You know, he really made himself a career. What makes Steadicam really special is that before we could move the camera so freely, we had to cut shots up into different angles. We'd have a wide establishing shot, then we'd have a close establishing shot, then we might have an over-the-shoulder shot, and then we might have a point of view shot of the character. But these would all be cut together as a sequence in the editing room. But here you have it, that you can do it all in one seamless go.
Even I couldn't
and now we have a reverse angle. We don't have a cut. And this is so like how we see the world ourselves. And it's very easy for us to relate to this.
And the best part was that upstairs,
the language of
editing,
editing,
didn't know what the fuck
where we
was
cut,
I mean, to them, everything looked
is a
on the
little
up and
bit
up,
distracting.
right?
We all understand it,
Wrong.
so we can understand what's happening in the
Guys inside
movies.
the counting room,
But every time there's a
all
cut, you have to
slipped in
re-establish
there to
what's going
skin
on,
the
who is
joint
where,
dry.
and what's happening. Garrett also changed the way we film sport with the Skycam. Try to remember how sports looked before Skycam. Cut, 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 cut. Every cut you have to think, where's the ball? Where's the direction of play? Who has possession? With the Skycam, you can just film on and on and on, endless takes, with this beautiful, breathtaking perspective. Garrett didn't stop there. Pretty much everything that ends in the word cam was invented at some time by Garrett. The dive cam. Why would you want to see just what happens above the water when you have the possibility of seeing underneath the water as well? This is the Atlanta Olympics. They had to cut out the Chinese competitors under the water because their swimsuit technology wasn't quite as good as it is today. But for the rest, it was a great success. He invented GoCam, which is a little camera on tracks that moves incredibly fast and can film athletics, skating, and tennis. And perhaps the most delightful of all is the Flycam. And even though this is a very unworldly perspective, we can read it perfectly and understand exactly what's happening from it. So he has really changed the way we can see the world. And he has very rightly deserves his place here in the Inventors Hall of Fame, 2013. And he would like to thank you all for that. Now, I was a much lesser character in this story. I was quite happy to carry the camera around on my shoulder, as long as it was an interesting camera. This one shot 250 or 300 frames per second. I was happy enough with that. You know, my idea of moving a camera was sticking it on the back of a mule and taking it somewhere more interesting. Yeah? Until the day I walked past Garrett on a trade show, and I looked longingly at this beautiful Steadicam equipment, and he said, "Would you like to try one on?" And I said, "I don't want to waste your time." And that was rather prophetic, because I've been wasting Garrett's time inordinately for the last 12 years ever since. And so I bought the machine and started filming with it as well. And I started thinking about what Garrett was telling me about wanting things. And sure, I want to get this shot, but how hard do I really want to run? And maybe start thinking about this, my first invention, which I'm very proud, but which could not have come into existence without my inventing partner, Ulick. As you probably worked out already now, Ulick is a street performer, but he's not a street performer you've ever seen before. That is an industrial robot that he is attached to with an 8-foot diameter drum that hurls him around like a trebuchet as he's playing it. Ulick takes pieces of mechanical equipment and does the most extraordinary and ridiculous things with them. He has a jet engine that he straps to his back. He's been clocked at 60 miles an hour going through streets of small villages in France. It was originally his idea. He grabbed me for the human factors part of it, and together we made the Steadiseg. Just take the handlebars off a Segway and steer it with your knees. What could be better? Interestingly enough, if you crash a Segway and you have the handlebar in front of you, you fall over. If you don't have the handlebar in front of you, you step off it. So an unexpected bonus. Here we have a mount for carrying a Steadicam. It'll carry up to 100 pounds of Steadicam equipment. The shots for Hugo, the 3D shots with the two cameras, were done. A lot of them were done in this device. And the third point is our safety fenders, which we'll come to later. But this allowed me to go off with my high-speed cameras and do the same job without running. So it allowed me to concentrate on the framing instead of concentrating on running. And every time I see that clip, I think, yeah, I'll have to get another one for the sound guy. It's just it's so unfair. And these are the kind of shots I can get with it. Stable, fluid, go wherever you want. Nice close-ups, everything. So, delightful thing to work with. And it's great. You want something and then you have it. What a feeling. It's unbeatable. I'm happy to say that this also has industrial applications. This is a Rivet Press used by Boeing. It weighs 55 pounds. It's a shoulder breaker. When you pick up something very heavy with your shoulders and then try to manipulate it with fine precision, that's what gets your tendons. That's what causes your shoulder injuries. It's not just the weight. It's not just the precision. It's a combination of the two. So a company called Equipoise has mounted this Rivet Press onto a gimbal, put it on a Steadicam arm, and then onto the SteadySeg. The self-balancing nature of the Segway means that you push the device forward and it moves to where you want to go. You pull it back and you stop. So you manipulate this amazing device in 0G. It's like it's weightless. It still has inertia, so it feels good, but it doesn't cost you any weight. And all the weight is being carried by the machine. I said I'd come back to the safety fenders. YouTube is full of accidents of Segways. I'm sure you've seen it. There's a guy who lives close to here, used to have a Segway and had a nasty accident on one. Most Segway accidents happen because the wheel runs up on something, catches on a curb, catches on a wall, bumps into something, the machine flips over. An advantage of our safety fenders is that doesn't happen anymore. Do you remember this accident from the Melbourne cricket ground? There's a cricket helmet.
You're going to stack this thing eventually, and you said, I said, no way, I'll never crash this thing, ever. Never, ever will you see me crash it. Say it.
But when you have safety fenders, it's not a problem anymore. So there was much rejoicing. And Garrett, one day, 2005, when we were teaching a Steadicam workshop in Paris, he told me about the history of the Steadicam. In 35 years, every bit of the Steadicam had been redesigned. The sled, the bit that carries the camera, total redesign numerous times. The arm, redesigned numerous times. Just pulled apart, put back together again, made better and better every time. The vest had not changed in 35 years. And the vest was a thing that hugged you in a rather unscientific way. And it restricted your breathing, it restricted your locomotion, and it just put the weight into your body just indiscriminately. So he said to me, I want you to redesign the vest. So we come to the ExoVest. Now, I didn't have the wherewithal or the forethought to lock myself in a hotel room for a week. You know, that's greater personalities than me do things like that. But I did fortuitously find myself marooned on a beach near the Amazon after shooting a film. I thought I was going to a resort, and I got dropped off at a little tiny Carib Indian village surrounded by a 250-hectare mangrove swamp. And the fishing boat that dropped me off wasn't coming back for a week. There was nothing there. And I thought, aha, this is my motel moment. I shall redesign the vest. So, paper and pens. There's no paper. There's no pens. But I had a camera. I had sand. I saved my battery power. I guarded it preciously. I drew my drawings in the sand. And when I got home, and this is the real joy of inventing, when you just get stuff. You get whatever materials you can find in the hardware store, you cut it up, you stitch it together, you get bits of plastic, bits of metal, and you make the thing that you think is going to work. Because all the time that you're designing it, you're thinking, how does it feel? How does it feel? And you don't know. You don't know until that magic moment when you put it on and you think, it feels like this. And it feels good. And it very quickly became this. This is now the exovest. It's an exoskeletal support structure, moves a little bit with your body, and puts the weight into very specific areas. And also the torque, the turning moment of holding something in front of your body, gets put into a very specific place that works very well with your physiology. The first reaction of Steadicam operators when they try it, it's really quite nice. This guy's so you have to
Chris, it's crazy, man.
He's a little bit emotive. Not like any of us would be.
You know the numbers, Dan? Yeah, right. You know the numbers for how much alone?
Oh man, it's crazy. These are just, thank you.
An American would be much more reserved.
I love you.
And I'm very proud to say that although Steadicam, the women Steadicam operators are among the best Steadicam operators in the world because they use balance and technique rather than muscling it like guys sometimes tend to do. That this is the first Steadicam vest that works for women. So it also has interesting industrial applications. This is Boeing plant, and the workers use it for riveting underneath the wings of airplanes. Riveters used to get these shoulder injuries quite frequently, which would cost Boeing about 100 grand every time somebody got a shoulder injury. Now they work without shoulder injuries. They work twice as fast. And the accuracy has gone up enormously. They have barely made any mistakes because they can fine-tune the position of this thing without using the weight, without carrying weight. It's also handy if you have to carry a big tool like this. Can you imagine doing this all day? And this way the tool floats in front of you in 0 G. So again, there was much rejoicing. And then poor old Rodney, now approaching his 100th birthday, starts to go downhill. And we're looking at Rodney and looking at his future, and we're not liking what we see. Nobody looks forward to getting into a walker. Walkers have the same problem that Segways do. If you fall over the walking frame. You have to learn how to use them. He was looking at rehab for various problems. And he would have 12 foot of parallel bars he would walk down, turn around, and 12 foot of parallel bars he would walk back. And ultimately, he's going to be in a wheelchair. He's going to be at this socially disadvantaged height down there with people talking over his head about what's happening with him. So we thought, we want something. What is it that we want? And that was the hardest thing to decide. What is it that we want? Just plucking it out of the air. How are we going to do that? There were lots of things that we didn't want, and that's maybe the easy bit. Maybe the best way is to think of all the things that you don't want, and then work back from there. We like the idea of people standing up. That seemed to be crucial. But, nobody looks forward to getting into one of these, so we didn't want it to look like that. We wanted to look maybe something more like this, but then how does she get the glass? Somebody has to pass her the glass. She can't go there and get it. She can't go and open the fridge door. She can't go to the cooker. She can't put on a kettle of water. And yet we wanted all the benefits of standing, all the benefits that standing brings. It keeps your bone density up. It keeps your circulation going. Even if you're not carrying your entire body weight, just mimicking walking is a wonderful thing for your body. Good for your digestive system. And you have the nice social advantage of being at eye level with people. And it was Garrett's idea to look back, way back into the past, to Baron von Drees. And have you ever heard of Baron von Drees or the Zeen? Baron von Drees in the early 19th century invented the precursor to the bicycle, and which was called at the time the dandy horse, which was a bicycle without pedals and without chain. It had a little elbow rest, so you could rest the weight of your body on it, and you simply kicked yourself around on it. And, of course, when we got pedals and chains, the dandy horse disappeared, only to reappear recently for children as, I forget what they call them, what do they call them? Balance bikes for kids, which are much better than training wheels Training wheels don't teach kids the weird balance situation of a bike, but balance bikes do. So what does it feel like? Get a bike, take the pedals off it, push it around. Does it feel interesting? Does it feel good? Yeah. And so, in homage to Baron von Drese's Zeen, we got the idea we were going to make the Zeen, whatever that was going to be. And, forgive me this next slide. I mean, when you see stuff like this, you probably really don't want this patent ever to end up in your table. But things start off like this. You grab bits of pieces that you have, you cut things apart, you put it together. You want to see what it feels like. So we got an old walker frame and did this to it. We didn't know what was going to happen. The guy in the machine shop that helped us do the final welding jumped on it.
Wowzer. Come on by.
And it instantly does something that we like, the ability to coast. We're starting to get ideas. You know, the old people in the mall with the grandchildren, you know, having to wait for them? Maybe the grandchildren would have to run to keep up with them. Wouldn't that be a great outcome? So we tested this on our dear friend, Alan Brown, who has ALS and cannot stand or cannot walk. And he cannot put his feet on the floor and move himself around. He has a very expensive wheelchair that raises him up and lowers him down very slowly with a little electric motor. When he wants to come up to eye level, he presses a button and zzz, he slowly comes up. So we thought, okay, we're able-bodied. We can kick around in this. How is it for someone who is seriously compromised? And we had to bear in mind that in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice, there is. And I feel sorry for Johannes Lambertus Adriana van de Sneepshout, because everybody remembers this quote as being from Yogi Berra. And you can understand perfectly why. So, Alan very graciously offered himself. And now Alan is taking his first steps in years, very cautiously. And he's actually able to move the thing. So we were hugely encouraged at this stage. So we decided to move on. Now, we didn't want something where people would be always at standing position. We also wanted a device that would turn into a seat. Because for people who are really compromised, transitioning from one device to another is difficult. You have to use a little plank going from one device to another. You slide yourself along it. We wanted it to be able to turn into a seat. So how do you make a saddle turn into a seat? Well, we come up with this folding
Face me,
contraption.
same thing. Go.
When you sit down, it turns into a flat seat. And then we started suspending it.
Stay down.
We suspended on bungee cords, which give out at the top, so we have a lot of lift at the bottom, very little lift at the top. See how that feels. And that felt very nice. We did experiments with longer...
More ISO.
More ISO. I have to
Yeah, it's
apologize.
kicking me more in the balls.
None of these... Sorry about that. I should have said before that, a caveat, none of these videos or photos were taken to be shown later. They were taken in the madness of the moment as notes for ourselves. We're lucky that iPhones exist. You know. Without that, we wouldn't have any of this stuff. So here we have a longer elastic band, which gives us more ISO. Isoelasticity is the property of a spring that it lifts just as much here as it does here. In other words, a spring that doesn't lift a lot here and then stop lifting there. So we built this. We designed and built this device with very long gas springs that would lift a seat up and become a saddle. And it became this rather bizarre-looking lounge chair type device, which works surprisingly well. You approach it, it's in the upright position, it's always sprung. You sit on the saddle deploys and turns into a seat. You lean forward, it lifts you up again. You move the armrest forward, that locks the seat height, and now you can either walk or you can coast with very little effort. So you're going through all motions of walking, but you're not necessarily supporting your entire body weight when you're doing it. If you have the use of one leg, if you're rehabbing a knee, you can work along perfectly well just with one leg. But the feeling of coasting along, so we really have to do something about the noise. And we tested the device on different ground. We tested it outdoors to see how it would work. It's a bit noisy, that one. Sorry about that. And it works pretty well outdoors on rough ground up to a certain point. Yeah, the noise thing reminds me of when the first Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow was brought to America. And the guy from Rolls-Royce was being interviewed on the radio. And he said to the guy from Rolls-Royce, he said, is it true when you're doing 60 miles an hour, the only thing you can hear is the ticking of the clock? And the man from Rolls-Royce said, yes, we really must do something about the clock. So, another thing we noticed is when we were working in this, we would spend, one of us would always be in the device.
A tribe of
chair,
newly
the right height.
civilized apes has found this and tried to figure out what happened here. Did they test the famous Zeen here?
If this had been a seat, and I was having a discussion with a tall man, if I was having a discussion with as tall a man as Garrett, I would be sitting down low looking at him. I would want to get up and talk to him. What we found is we were spending all our time in the device, and that gave us a really good feeling. We even had time to play around. Now, I'm not a tennis player, so hitting Garrett on the head with a tennis ball is probably the finest shot I will ever pull off. Alan liked it. Alan said to us, this is the only thing that allows me to have my feet on the ground when I'm moving around. And he said, and that is a good feeling. Tested it on another friend who has...
But my initial reaction is it's fabulous. I mean, for somebody who's disabled and needs this sort of thing, it's a godsend. This is fantastic.
We love it when people say stuff like that. You know, it's great. Makes it all worthwhile. So back to the prototype, pull it apart. All the fun bit starts again. You start sawing up bits of wood. You start cutting through things. You start hammering and nailing and making it 3 wheels. 3 wheels was an absolute, unmitigated disaster. But you got to know. You got to find out. And then we realized something very important about the lift. Remember the feeling of being in the seesaw when you were a child, or even, I don't know, maybe last week. Who knows? Do you know that feeling where you just give a little kick off and you rise up into the air? It's like being on the moon. If you've got the right balance weight, it's almost like being weightless. And that's something we didn't have with that prototype. We had this spring system that would just run out of lift at the top. We didn't like that. We wanted it to lift isoelastically, top to bottom. We started experimenting with different types of isoelasticity that would lessen a little bit at the top of the throw. And so instead of those gas springs, we had to go back to a very old concept, the lifting parallelogram, which is what lifts a Steadicam arm. And then we had to start charting force curves and try to get that curve as flat as possible so that our lift was really even throughout the device. And then, because we had so much lift and push all the time, we had to start looking at the anatomy. It's a very strange view of the human body. Don't be shocked. I know it's a bit early in the morning for this kind of stuff. But here are the sitting bones, the 2 ischial protuberances, the bits that get sore when you sit on a bad seat. And that seat was bad. Take my word for it. It was bad. We had to start looking at the differences between the pelvises of men and women and between individuals. So we had to plot out different percentiles. And you know what? The answer had been staring us in the face all the time. The normal bicycle saddle, of course, was our solution. And we just had to extend it a little bit in the prow so that if somebody is just walking along in the device, the prow of it just sits comfortably between their legs so that they can walk with their entire weight on it. And yet, they're not going to fall or lose balance anywhere. So the great joy now of building things, of cutting things up, of making test beds, and this is really the fun part of all of this stuff. This is endlessly engaging. And then sitting on it, and then drawing it out, and then coming up with a new design. And then getting in, cutting huge hunks of aluminum in band saws, looking at inscrutable details on little pieces of paper, welding stuff, cutting it, welding it back together again, drilling holes and things. And then the moment when you can test it, and before we even get the wheels on it, we wanted to see what is the lift like. We wanted a lift that was so finely balanced that when you're sitting down, you're sitting there and there's no lift. But when you lean forward, just the act of leaning forward transfers a little bit of the weight of your body into your feet. And that's enough to allow the machine to lift. So we wanted to know, was that going to happen? Okay, not using the legs, just leaning forward. Gets me the lift. Still not using the legs. Okay, onto the legs and now. Take the weight off the legs. Lean back to sink and down. And once I'm down, I've got movement around the seat without any lift. But when I go beyond this point, I've automatic lift. So we were extremely happy with that. Now we're going to take it out into the real world and test it to people who were not necessarily friends. Friends are extremely forgiving and enthusiastic. And we did a little safety test on it. Again, I apologize for the quality of the footage, but I'm just running it up against the log to see if it's going to topple over. Really fine. No, not only have done not topple over, but the center of gravity lowers, so it makes it less liable to topple over. We were very happy about that. And we had a gentleman who came into an auditorium in a wheelchair and volunteered to get on the device, which made it just about as nervous as we've ever been, if you remember. Remember how nervous we were? Oh, my goodness. And, well, how fast was he tooling around on it? Pretty fast. I mean, we were pretty worried about him. So that's a good sign. We tried it. People of different body shapes and sizes. We took it to an old people's home, where the old people treated it like a picnic day. They got their lounge chairs out, and they gave everybody a round of applause after they had a go on it. And they could move around on it. And this woman could be our poster girl.
Do you hear me, honey? Do you hear me?
What?
I can walk for 60 blocks.
That's good. 60 blocks, I don't know. I can't walk for 60 blocks. You know, what's he talking about? We also tested on a friend who'd had a horrific knee accident. He'd fractured his femur, and his whole knee joint had to be rebuilt. And he could not stand up by himself. He could not walk by himself. So we're very curious to see how he would get along on it.
This is very comfy.
Oh, just love it.
I love it. I tell you, all right, now if I want to...
If you want to sit, then
sit,
you just lean back, put your weight back, and you should sink all the way down. Yeah, I think it's pretty good for you.
Yeah.
To come up again, put your hands on your knees. Yeah, and just stand up.
Oh, God. Get me one of these.
And you can relax it. The trick of the hands and the knees is to learn not to push up on this, because that doesn't help, because it comes up with you.
You can come up faster too if you want, Wes. Just transfer your weight to the floor and up you go.
That is amazing.
So we had our lift. We had our lovely lift that we were hoping to get. And we took it out onto the street to see what it would be like in a normal environment. I mean, what about if you want to go shopping? Real world application. You want to look down at something that's low, you want to look up at something that's high, you want to move around. How does it actually feel socially to be in a device like this? I mean, how compromised do you feel by the device? And what we feel is, and we could well be wrong, is that having a lot of it behind you is a very good thing. Having very little in between you and other people is a good thing. So when you're having interactions with people, you have more or less normal interactions at eye level, which we're very hopeful is a great benefit. How do you get out a door? Does the door present a problem? No. How do you get down the street? Just head down the street. And you can go at a normal rate. You can go at a normal walking rate. You can even go a little bit faster. I love what happens now. If he were in a wheelchair, he would be hidden by the street furniture. And the car driver wouldn't immediately see him. As it is, he's coming along at normal height. Well, Garrett's not normal height, he's a giant. But he has this person-to-person interaction. It's as if he was just walking. And we find that very valuable. We tested it in the home. If you're in the home in a wheelchair and you want to go into your kitchen and make something, you may have to take a walker, wheel the walker in, stand up, hold onto the walker, do stuff one-handed. We wanted to see what would happen. Could you do it in this device? We found out if you just put yourself into it with a seat belt, the device follows you around and allows you to do stuff. But it gives you a little bit of stability. So if you're slightly unsure on your feet, you don't have quite the leg strength, you have a little bit of a balance problem, you're worried about falling over, then you can have something like this in your home. And it'll allow you just to walk around and do your normal stuff with a reasonable amount of agility. And when you want to sit down, you pull back the armrests, boom, you're in a chair. And when you want to raise up to welcome someone, you don't have to push a button and hear the whirring of an engine. You just give a little touch with your feet and you rise up like you're on the moon, like you're in 0G. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the stage that we have got to. This is our third prototype, and we've loved almost every, I was going to say every minute, but that would have been a dreadful lie. We've loved almost every minute of the design process. And I hope I brought some of that joy to you. Now, Brandon, do we have Brandon somewhere? Yes. Big round of applause for Brandon here. Well, Brandon, how's it going? Hey, you see, this is what happens. Now he's going for the full circuit. We're timing you, Brandon. And if you would come up to the front, we can demonstrate the seating. Thank you very much. You put your armrests back and lean back and sit down. Very good. And now put your hands on your knees and just lean forward. Does it lift you up? There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're finished.
Chris, excellent presentation. We thank you for coming in. As a token of our appreciation, we have a framed copy of the first patent.
Oh, wow.
So it's only a copy. Unfortunately, it's not the original. But yes, thank you. You traveled in from
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam, yes. So thank you for making the trip. We really appreciate it.
It's an honor and a privilege.
Yeah,
thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.